Hello and welcome to Can You Hear Me at the Back, the podcast about all things voice and communication. Hi Aundrea.
Hi Leon.
Hi. So, how are you feeling in a word, in a sound and a movement? Go.
Bra. Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah. Leon, how are you feeling with a sound and a movement? I had two thoughts. One is that I thought your nose was making that noise for a second. And I was like, wow, talented.
I feel like a deflating balloon. I think that's this thing.
That's quite depressing. I'm not crying. It's normal. Okay. Leon, what are we talking about today?
Okay, so the title of the podcast episode is It Doesn't Feel Natural.
Ooh. Ah. What is that?
Ooh, ah. Well, it's one of those things that we've been talking about quite a lot because it comes up as one of those things that people say all the time, right?
Yeah.
So here we are working with somebody and they say, oh, it just doesn't feel natural.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what does natural mean?
Yeah.
What's that all about?
It really threw me when I first heard it because I thought, I thought, why would it feel natural? Because I thought, well, if we're doing something extraordinary, then wouldn't it feel beyond like your normal?
Wouldn't it feel extra daily?
It would feel extraordinary.
Yeah, different, more than
Hippin'.
extra.
Yeah.
So extra. And also, it's in like modern vernacular.
Yeah.
Ugh, she's so extra.
That's so true.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which also weirdly means the same as basic in modern vernacular. Ugh, she's so basic.
She's so basic. I use basic and extra differently. Different. Yeah.
Right.
Because so basic to me is that like you is a basic person, like
like stupid.
Not stupid, just like the bare minimum is happening right now.
Okay.
But if you're extra, you're doing a lot of other things, and the hand motion goes with it. Yes. You're doing a lot of other things that don't need to be happening, and yet they are. So you're being extra. It's like
It does still feel like the same thing though. Do you know what I mean?
It can be.
Like people who are really stupid often doing a lot of extra stuff.
It could, like, I use it when, like, I think it tends to happen with, like, emotions, too, where you're, like, you know, if you're, like, having a bad day and you go into Starbucks and then you start to argue with the barista, it's like, you're being that extra, like, there's no reason for all of this. No reason.
For all of this.
It's got super New York right now. There's no reason for this. I just need to get my coffee and just go. Accent.
Oh, I love it. Love it.
Right. So, it doesn't feel natural.
Yeah. So why does it not feel natural?
Yeah, why not?
So like...
We came up with reasons. We have
reasons. We've got stuff. Yeah. So like, why does it not feel natural? Well, natural's an interesting phenomenon, right? Because... of course, for both of us, it's totally natural to speak English. Yeah. But of course, that's because we're familiar with the language.
But is it? Is it natural to speak?
No, so totally isn't.
It's not, because you were the one who told me this. It's not natural, because language is not something that is, I mean, you're not born with language. No. You're born with the ability to acquire language. Yes. But you're not born with language. So language itself isn't... If we're using the word natural as being something that you were born with innately and has always been within you, then language is not natural in that sense.
No, because if nobody spoke to you, you wouldn't speak.
Right.
You wouldn't have acquired the language.
Right.
So when you're trying to speak a language, you have to, like, immersion in that language is like arguably the best way of learning it, because you have to learn it. You have to actually use it and understand it, rather than the thing that I hated. One of the things I hated most about school was sitting in a classroom and learning language.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yo tengo.
Can
Si
I
tienes. Nosotros tenemos.
You do love your tango. Sorry,
Tango?
tenir. Your tenir.
Tengo tienes, tienes. That's how my sister learned it with the song. Tengo tienes, tienes. That was a song. You can look it up on YouTube.
Look it up. It's a great learning tool.
Yeah.
But it's the thing about how you learn by making the mistakes, but you learn because people actually teach it to you.
Yeah.
They give it to you by the virtue of the fact that they use it at you
Yeah.
and on you and with you.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have somebody speak to you or people speak to you, you wouldn't know language.
Yeah, you wouldn't speak. And there are cases of that, of people being
Yeah.
locked up for that crucial time in their life where you're supposed to be acquiring language and never being able to fully acquire or develop language because they weren't being spoken to.
And the frightening thing is that even in countries that are considered to be advanced, first world, should we say? No, probably not.
No.
But
That sounds political.
there are more and more examples of children arriving at school
Yes.
at the age of 4 who don't speak.
Yeah, or aren't being spoken to.
Because they're not being spoken
Yeah.
to. And television has some good things going for it.
Yeah.
But
I was so carefully.
yeah, it's like
There's some
it's not as good as
positives.
podcasts. No, but television is really important because it is a way for children to learn things that they might not be given in the home.
Right.
Like they might not have access to, I don't know, colourful things, lots of random stuff, do you know what I mean? They wouldn't, maybe they don't see pets, they don't see animals, they don't know what those things are. So sometimes that's a fantastic way of being able to gain access to that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, there are lots of children who, because they're just plopped in front of the television, and then you have to watch something because parents are busy, fine, but that's not a substitution for
a human
being.
Yeah.
And
it's not that they're not developing language, they're just not developing conversational skills that require certain aspects of language.
And it's not easy.
No.
Hasten to add, not easy.
No.
A friend of mine once said to me at a dinner party. What? I know, dinner party. I'm in my 30s.
No.
Dinner party. So, said to me, I find it really difficult to talk to my daughter. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, 1 at the time. She's like, I find it really difficult. She's not 15. She wasn't
like,
that
that seems like a different conversation.
That is a different conversation, different topic. But she was saying, I find it really difficult. It's like I'm talking to this creature that doesn't understand. And I was like, but she does understand.
Yeah.
And if you ask her to do something, then she might comply, or she might ignore you, or she might just not understand you, and therefore you have to explain it in a different way.
Yeah.
But by virtue of the fact that you are speaking to her, she is acquiring language. So it's important, even if you feel like an idiot doing it.
Yeah.
Which is lots of people feel self-conscious.
Well, you know what I think it is I think there's this idea. So when we talk about registers and different types of and different types of speech, which I will thoroughly explain in a minute. That people believe that there's a certain way that you should talk to children. So that you should talk to kids with a high voice. And you should be like, hi, how are you? Where's your mommy? And things like that. And I think that's what makes people feel uncomfortable talking to children. Which is completely not true. You don't have to talk to your kids like that. My dad actually made a rule that we, like, when people came to our house, that they were supposed to talk to us like we were mini adults. Because that's what we were, mini adults.
That sounds awesome. Because that was one of the things when I was a child that annoyed me the most.
Yeah.
When people were like, oh, hello, how are you? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm neither stupid nor deaf. What is wrong with you? Like, I would find it condescending.
It is.
As a child.
Yeah.
And it is condescending
It is. And
to a child.
people do it to people who speak English as a second language. Like, don't get me started on people who yell at people. Hi, my name, and you're like,
I would like Esther sandwich.
like that doesn't help.
That's not even a thing.
That's not helping. But it does feel condescending. But it's because they're different ways of talking to people.
And that's called registers.
Yes. So what is the official thing of a register? A register is a language that we use in different social situations. So it encompasses everything, including like the phonology or the sound and the grammar and the words that you use. So you have different registers. Say there's like motherese, so people talking to babies, right? You see how that works?
Circling back. Sure.
Yeah, there's like there's one called like law speak. I'm not sure what the actual term for it is. There is like a term for like lawyers talking to each other.
Yeah. But then doctors must have that. There must be like jargon that's related to that.
Yes.
So like business people, IT people can't understand a word they say.
Voice people.
Hi, we love some jargon.
Yeah, we do.
A bit of jargon, lovely.
Yeah.
And I suppose jargon really does fall into that. Well, does it? Because it is, I suppose, register, but at the same time, it's a choice. So it's a choice to use that because you don't have to use an acronym or a bit of jargon.
Yeah.
You could use the full phrase or whatever, and it kind of is exclusive, isn't it?
It can be. It marks you as being part of that community. Like everything does with language, though.
Yeah.
Like accents mark you as part of being, like people know that I'm generally from the Americas. Because I don't know why I said it that way. The Americas.
Because that's how I say it.
Okay. Because of the way that I sound, and that's totally valid in some ways, in shapes and forms. It's when you start to add other things on that, so it's implying that somebody is lesser than because of the way that they speak. That is a problem. Don't do that.
Which is interesting because when we were preparing for this episode and writing stuff down, we separated out register as the use of language overall, and then we looked at style, and style is the choice of the things that make up register that you can use.
Right.
And one of the things that I wrote down was accent.
Yeah.
Because people sometimes think that accent is fixed.
Yeah.
All of your research about fossilization, fabulous. Or if it is even a thing.
The myth of fossilization.
Check out episode 2 for accent fossilization stuff.
Yeah.
About what you'd been doing research about.
Yeah.
But the accent is movable. It's a kind of, well, it's not. Well, it is movable. It's a movable feast. You can decide on having and keeping the accent that you acquired initially, or you can change it.
It's not easy. I'm not saying that it's an easy thing. I think that's why people feel like they're quite stuck in their accent, because it's not. It is a very difficult thing to do, especially given certain particular circumstances. But I do believe that it can happen.
Yeah. So then, and within that, I suppose, not just within accent, but not just separate to accent, but within accent, within looking at pronunciation.
Yeah.
So do you drop your T's? Do you over aspirate and hypercorrect your H's? Do you say, things like there's some wonderful comedy sketches, mainly from like the 70s and that sort of stuff in the UK, where people would have to put extra H's into things to sound posh, and like or upper class, and it was that sort of stuff where people wouldn't really understand. But one of the key identifiers of class, for example, would be the accent and whether or not you said H's or you didn't. So did you aspirate or did you not? Yeah. So if you were doing that, so there was like this kind of, well, if I do the her, then obviously I am now her speaking upper class. And it was, of course it's not, but it's a beautiful little kind of social thing.
It's like a marker.
Marker.
Yeah, that's what I say for them. But anyway, we're speaking about registers and style, and our initial thing was it doesn't feel natural. Why doesn't it feel natural?
It's not just because of how familiar you are with it,
right?
But it's also to do with the identity associated with the thing that you're moving towards.
Right. Yeah.
And you had a wonderful quote the other day from Eric Singer.
Oh yes.
The extraordinary Eric Singer.
Oh yes, he's brilliant.
We love.
I used him in my dissertation many times.
Yeah. So he said, if you can't imagine yourself being...
If you cannot imagine yourself as being that person, that it's going to be difficult or nearly impossible for you to acquire the accent of the person that you're trying to inhabit. So if you cannot I'm just going to re-paraphrase that again. If you cannot imagine yourself as a person that would have this accent, you are not going to acquire that accent. Or at least it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to do, and it might not be accurate. And I was doing that in the case of ESL students learning RP. But yeah, so there is this idea that that your image of yourself, so who I think I am, and how I speak belongs to that, because speech and language is so integrated into identity, that as soon as that starts to move somewhere, so as soon as you say, okay, we need to work on your T and your D placement, right? A person goes, wait, no, but that's part of who I am. And now you're starting to change something about me, right? And that's quite hard to separate, because as a voice coach, a lot of times what I'm saying is not, I need you as a person to change, but I need you to change a thing that you do to accommodate a performance. Right. And so whether you go out into a pub and you continue to do your T's and D's, I don't care. Like, do what you want with your T's and your D's. I don't care.
Yeah.
But as long as we're in the space of performance, and I am your voice coach or your accent coach or whatever job I'm facilitating, that needs to be done. And most of the time it's purely for audibility. And that kind of thing.
For like acoustic purposes.
Yeah, for acoustic purposes.
Dovetails beautifully into my research.
Oh my
How wonderful of you to do that. Which we won't talk about. But it is really interesting that there is so much identity wrapped up in how people speak, and that when you try and shift something, even in the short term and for a specific reason, there is still this kind of visceral response to it on an emotional, on a really sort of deep-seated level about identity, which is both brilliant and also kind of debilitating and inhibiting at the same time. It's
quite delicate to work with too, because I'm sure you've had that experience where you say something to a student, and then they start, you can almost see them starting to look inward and go, wait a minute, what does that mean about me? Right? And take this kind of like very personal approach to something that you thought was quite aesthetic and something that was quite separate from who they are, but people do tie that in together. And I don't think that's wrong or bad. I mean, there are things about me that I feel quite personal about when people talk about in terms of voice quality or accent or things of that nature. But when I'm talking about a performance, right, and you as a person portraying a character in a theatrical setting, that to me feels quite different, because then it shouldn't be about you, Leon. But
it's about the character that I'm portraying.
Yeah, and I feel the same way about language and registers, right? So if I think a lot of times what gets people really, and this happens a lot when we do sonnets and say Shakespeare, my students go, oh my gosh, I can't do that. I don't speak that way. I don't think that way a lot of times is what they say. I don't think that way. And it comes out to this idea of, it doesn't feel natural. And that's not a comment on necessarily what's happening acting wise, but it's a comment of what they're seeing on a page. So they're saying, I would never go out into the world and say this to my friends. I was like, well, no. Why would you?
Although, when I was doing my thesis research, I had a very long conversation with the wonderful Barbara Houseman. We always reference Barbara like every episode.
Yeah.
Hi Barbara, when you're listening. I talked about the podcast with her 2 days ago, and and she said to me, we use metaphor in our lives. We use imagery. We say that, it was as big as a house, and it's like, was it? It was not really. It was the size of a ballpoint pen. It wasn't really the size of a house.
It's hot as hell. I use that a lot.
It was hot as hell, and we use things like, we use that all the time, and it's not, I waited for ages. Well, did you? I mean, how many eons passed before the bus arrived?
I have no idea.
It's kind of, I'm dying of hunger. It's like, well, we use hyperbole as well, and it's kind of like, we use all of those things. It's just maybe the image that was chosen by Shakespeare. or the image that was chosen by Alan Ayckbourn or whoever it might be. I don't know. I can only think of British male white
I
people.
wonder why.
James Baldwin. It could be anyone.
Just gonna throw that in. It was getting way too white for a
Just
second.
like, well, that's fine, it's an African American. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those amazing things that we do all the time, and yet it's considered to be really alienating for some reason because it's a classical reference.
Yeah, and I think I think there's something too about the language and how it's used, because I have a lot of students who look at it and be like, oh my gosh, I don't understand it, and that's automatically what happens. They go, I don't understand it, I don't get it. It gets a huge like X in their mind, and then anything you try to do after that is it just falls, because they don't see it as being something familiar. They don't see it as something that it's not the way that they necessarily speak. And you said something really brilliant.
No.
Well, look at this. This podcast is just full of us giving each other compliments. It's talking about how smart we are.
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
But you said something really great about about the way it was in your presentation about the way that younger people communicate now in terms of texting, and that there is this that the level of sophistication hasn't changed in terms of, I don't want to say it wrong.
Yeah, no, so the language that they're using has not necessarily changed.
Right.
Insofar as the complexity of the vocabulary that they're using has not changed.
Right.
However, the manner in which they communicate has.
Right.
So whether or not they abbreviate things, and what's really interesting is like generational uses of text speak.
Yeah.
So people in our parents' generations much more likely to use text speak, because they had the phones where you had to like click through and press S to find
like
an S.
4
you had to press 4 times, you had to press 7 4 times, and
I had that too.
Me too.
Yeah.
So but then what happened was we had the keyboard. We now have keyboards that are, QWERTY keyboard or however you want your keyboard set up, that's okay. But we have those keyboards, and then we can do everything. And some people, I think you've got that, haven't you? Have you got that? Which is like the...
I used to, where you can just swipe from like one level. I couldn't handle it.
No, I couldn't work out how to do that. Okay. But I'm sure I could get used to it. But like, it's one of those things where now the language that we use is kind of the same, but the means of communication is different. Yeah. So people aren't. So language isn't being eroded by the use of technology. It's just the means of communication, and one of the means of communication that has been diminished most is the means of verbal or oral communication. So when people are actually speaking, this was what I was saying. Yes. About an observation that I've made of the young people that I work with in and around London, and in and around the UK in various places, that they don't complete a sentence. Right. So I'll ask a question and they'll say, oh yeah, because because I'm like, I know you've said nothing. And then I ask them to actually speak, and they get quite, they feel quite vulnerable. They feel quite sort of embarrassed sometimes because they're actually being asked to say what they think, because they're used to starting a sentence and before they can complete the phrase, somebody else interjects. So whether or not that's because the quality of listening has changed or because the speed at which we try and communicate has changed. Yeah. So how do you know when somebody else is finished? And so this is really interesting in terms of actor training. Right. Because if you're asking somebody to speak several paragraphs of text, that for them is absolutely unheard of in their life. Because when does somebody allow you to speak at length and really listen to you? No. Right now. This is it. But like, apart from therapy, which is a totally different. I mean, if you really want to be listened to, guys,
that's quite therapeutic.
Pay for therapy.
Though. That is amazingly therapeutic to have somebody listen to you like uninterrupted, and that's one of my big things. Like, I don't like to be interrupted, but the only reason is because My family, but that's also like a linguistic and an accental thing, and like my family is quite, and there's an interesting thing about culture in there too. Sorry, I can continue.
But no, that's right as well. That's true, and it's a little bit like food in my culture.
Yeah.
So as an Ashkenazi Jew, woo, hi.
Hello.
So like there is never food left.
Yeah.
And if you don't get your fork in there quick, you ain't eating.
Yeah.
Like you have to just like elbows out, get the fork in, get your food on your plate, eat. And there's no kind of like, you can't eat. I mean, you shouldn't speak with your mouth full. That's always told off.
Yeah.
But if you're eating and chewing and listening, then by the time, when the person that you're speaking to takes a bite, that's when you talk.
Yes, yeah.
Until they've stopped chewing, and then you chew. Yeah. And it's like, there's this sort of reciprocal agreement that while I'm chewing, you talk. And then, and it's kind of, there's this whole culture that's associated with eating, but you have to get in there really quick.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you won't
don't eat. Yeah.
Or you will eat, but you. And the worst one is
the
cousins who like take lots of stuff because they know that they're not going to get choice in a minute, and then they don't eat it.
Oh, this is a waste of food.
Livid. Makes me so angry.
I'm angry.
I'm like that. Are you going to eat that or what? And they're like. I'm not sure yet. I might eat it later. Well, there is no.
I'm not sure is not the correct answer for food on your plate. Are you gonna eat that? I'm not sure. Invalid.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
That means
your plate is
now.
mine. That's invalid. Okay.
So I think that sort of thing happens culturally.
Yeah.
And there's been like a cultural appropriation of that sort of feeling within the way that people are communicating. So they're not given the time to say what they really mean, and then they're not used to grappling with what I'm doing at the moment, which is trying to find the words that I need in order to be able to express what I want to say.
And so when that happens, it doesn't feel
natural.
Oh my god,
because it's so unfamiliar.
Yeah. And it does, and I think people tend to use natural as something that I feel like would happen every day. You know what I mean? Like it's something that would occur every day for me in my life, which is not technically, I think, what natural means, but I think that's how people use it. So they use it to mean familiar, but they're saying natural.
It's almost like when people say normal.
Yeah.
Like,
that doesn't feel normal.
What do you mean normal?
Yeah.
And it's like, when somebody says to me, "Am I normal?" and I'm like,
no.
What's that?
What do you want to be normal? Who was it? I think it was Whoopi Goldberg who has this amazing quote about normal, and she's like, normal is a setting on a washing machine. I feel like I'm misquoting that, but it's like my favorite thing. But it's not something a person can be. It's just a setting. Right?
That's brilliant.
I know. I sort of just claimed it, but it's clearly not mine.
No, I mean...
It's not...
Whoopi, if you're listening, get in touch.
You should listen. She's going to be here soon in the UK.
She's going to be in London soon.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a podcast with Whoopi Goldberg.
Plotting. And what will probably happen...
If anybody knows Whoopi Goldberg, hook us up.
Hit us up, because she's my favorite.
So register is the language and the different parts of language that you have access to, whether that's vocabulary or syntax or prosody, so the intonational and inflective contours of language, stress patterns, all those sorts of wonderful things.
Just using all my favorite words.
I know, right? And then style is the choice of those things, like what you want to do. Yeah. Which is brilliant in the context of acting, because the vast majority of what I talk about when I'm coaching actors, not just in voice but in acting as well, is about choice.
If you've met any of my students, you will notice the only thing I think that they remember that I ever say is it's a choice. That's my favorite thing to say, because it is a choice. It is a choice, and it just so happens that sometimes when we're working on certain repertoire or we're working on certain, plays or things that are done are written in a particular style, that then the language has to fit that. Just kind of like, and I feel like people get this physically. You know what I mean? People understand that in a physical way. That if it's a period piece, then I need to, it needs to look this way. And but when language comes into it, I think people there's a sense of almost like a mismatch in that. And I think it's because people find language so personal, and they're like, you can't change the way I speak because it's me.
And yet you can really parody that and use it for satire. So if you guys, if YouTube or like search on the old interweb for
Like this,
Armstrong and Miller, so Alexander Armstrong and Ben Miller doing the First World War pilots. I'll play it to you after the recording.
Okay.
It's fabulous. And it's just brilliant. So brilliant. Modern vernacular, contemporary vernacular, and World War One style, 1910s sort of heightened RP.
Oh.
It's brilliant. Guys, check it out. I'll
That's
put a link to the
exactly what we're
YouTube clip
talking
in the show notes. If you want to contact us about anything we said in the podcast, you can reach us on Twitter at CanYouHearPod,
or on Instagram at Can You Hear Me Podcast,
or you can search for us on Facebook and on YouTube,
or email us at canyouhearme@theback@gmail.com,
You can find me, Leon, on Twitter at Leon Trayman,
or me, Aundrea, at Aundrea Fudge on Twitter.
Please support the podcast by subscribing as a patron on our Patreon site
The link is in the show notes.
to keep the podcast advertisement free, as well as get access to cool extra stuff, discounts, bonus episodes, as well as supporting ongoing voice research funding as well. Okay, love you, bye!